It's good to be back back on the back on the stick, studying together. A little bit of break, but Baruch Hashem for good things.
Rabbi, you even deserve the vacation after that.
Okay, let's get there. We haven't done that yet. But I did want to just learn together about an issue we raised a couple weeks ago. I want to revisit in the moral dilemma about the concept of objective truth. It's an interesting thing to think about, and again, happens in a variety of different places in the Torah, which we'll look at. But I wanted to talk about something, that we've raised a couple of different interesting, issues where you could make an argument, and I'm going to try and expand upon it. You could make an argument that truth isn't always think it is. Let me explain. If somebody calls you and says, "Hey, can you come here?" and I say, "I'll be there in a second," objectively, to the nuanced, detailed translation of the word, you are not telling the truth. You will be there in more than a second, But have you done something egregiously wrong by saying I'm going to be there in a second, right? So that's kind of the question I want to try and expand upon, in a broader sense. If you think about, other more detailed questions. For example, if somebody says, "Hey, can you come and help me move? Right, I have to move my furniture. Can you help me move my furniture?" Okay. And you say, "I'd be happy to. I'd be ecstatic to come and help you move your furniture." Right? I'd be happy to, I need some help. My files are totally disorganized. I need somebody who's an organized head to come and spend a few hours with me and help me reorganize my files. Right? And they call you up and say, "Hey, can you come over for a few hours, back before COVID, whatever, help me organize my files?" And you say, "I'd be happy to." Now, the truth is that you might not actually, is that objective truth? Right? You have other things that you might want to do, but you know that the role that you have as a friend is to express yourself in that way, because as a friend, that's what friends do, to be able to help each other out, and you can make the time. Would it be probably a little bit more objectively truthful to say, I'm actually not that interested in helping you. I have a lot of other things to do, and you're not really that good of a friend. I'm not so friendly with you, and I'd rather actually not spend the time, but because I'm going to feel guilty if I don't come, you know what, I'll spend the time reluctantly. Now, objectively, in a technical sense, the latter may actually be the quote unquote truth. However, I don't think I would recommend anybody actually saying it that way. Miriam, did you want to jump in?
No, I just wanted to say, of course, what you just said, that it's okay if you want to lose your friend.
Right.
Just be prepared. These people who say,
Susan. Yeah,
people who say, "Oh, I had to be truthful. I just had to tell the truth." And my feeling is, okay, tell the truth, and then know that you hurt someone's feelings, and then know that you'll be responsible if your relationship is over. So you have that choice. Tell the truth and be prepared for your relationship to be over.
Yeah, Suzanne, what do you want to say? Yeah.
I am a yeker, okay, or yekit. Mm-hmm. So I take my words very seriously. I never give a compliment that I really don't think it is a compliment. If I say something, "Oh, today you just look wonderful," I mean it. But the thing is, if I say I'd be happy to, what I mean is, I'm happy because you gave me an opportunity now to help you, because you did so many things for me.
Right, it's very nice.
Yeah, you're a friend. You're at the top. So let me a couple of other scenarios. Yeah. So there is a fascinating author by the name of Goffman. My father actually introduced me to him, and I studied him in college, who has this, what he calls, I think the term is the Dramaturgical Thesis, where he actually suggests that truth is not necessarily always saying the actual description of the facts. As Miriam said, you're going to lose your friend if you actually describe the fact, which is that I'm not really that good of a friend of yours, don't really like you very much, but would feel kind of guilty if I didn't do it, so I'll come over and help you organize your files. That may be an objective description of the fact, but the way he presents it is that basically all life should be seen in a certain regard as a theater, as a stage. And he goes in really great detail in describing, different roles that you play. And so the way he defines the way it means to be truthful is true to the role you are playing. When this person calls you up and says, I need a couple hours that somebody will come over and help me organize my files, right? What they are reaching out to you is in your role as friend. And in your role as friend, the accurate way of responding is, yes, I'm happy to do it. Because that's what it means to be the role as friend, even if the objective truth is that you are kind of tired and probably just, don't have the Sitzfleisch right now to come over and do it, but you do it because that's what is important and true to your role as friend. And by the way, to go to Suzanne's point, in the opposite direction as well, which is sometimes your role as friend is to say, listen, that clothing that you're wearing right now has a big stain on it. Not to say, oh, you look wonderful. You want to help them out by telling them there's a big stain on their clothing so that they don't get embarrassed in the way that they present themselves. So, it's a really nuanced proposition. And in fact, the case we dealt with a little bit before is the famous case of the hospital visit, right? Where a person you're again, back before COVID, you're visiting somebody in the hospital. And on the way to their room, you see an open door. And in that open door happens to be your across the street neighbor. And so you say, oh, I know this fellow, I know this person, this man, this woman, I'll stop in and see how they're doing. And they say to you, wow, I've been so lonely. And the fact that you made a special trip to come visit me in the hospital raises my spirits, totally changes everything because you made that special trip. You didn't have to come to the hospital today. You didn't have anything else to do, but you made a special trip just to visit me. And that totally, raises my spirits and my willingness to fight this illness, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, you happen to be visiting someone else. And again, we go back to that the objective truth. Had you known that your across the street neighbor happened to be in the hospital, you might not have made a special trip to the hospital to visit them. It's fortuitous that as you walk by, you saw out of their peripheral vision, the corner of your eye, that this person is in the hospital. So you said you'd stop by. How obligated are you to go into that detail and say, well, I didn't actually come to visit you. Frankly, had I known you were here, I probably still wouldn't have come to visit you. But now that I see you, I'm happy to come and give you a smile and give you a visit, etc. Obviously, we would not recommend the latter of going that far and saying, though it is, again, the technical objective truth that this person isn't important enough to you to merit a special trip to the hospital to visit them. But what about that first part? Is it, misrepresenting to say, oh no, I actually went to visit so-and-so and I saw you here, so I'd stop by? Or do you just keep quiet? Or if the person says, yes, so did you make, that makes such a difference. You made a special visit for me, right? Well, is it accurate or legal or ethical to then stretch the truth and maybe even say, yes, I made this special trip for you, knowing I want the kind of impact it would have on their health? So this question of objective truth comes into a really interesting, nuanced area. By the way, we shared this in a different class a couple of weeks ago or some time back, where it was the opposite. Well, what happens if you know something that will damage that person? And the example we gave, which is a very, very difficult example, was if you're a healthcare provider who knows someone's terminal diagnosis and you're concerned that telling them that diagnosis will actually, accelerate them not doing well, that they won't give up hope or they won't, et cetera. And so you keep that diagnosis from them or you don't tell them. All right. So again, all of these questions come to that sense and that understanding of truth. Now, I will say that what we're doing right now is a very dangerous discussion. Because talk about a slippery slope here. If we're trying to bring all sorts of different messages and understanding and, et cetera, of the, of the nature of, truth, and we'll agree, midvar sheker tirchak, right? It's a Jewish value that truth is an immutable sense of what we are and believe in as Jews, then it's a really slippery slope to start finding loopholes. Here you do tell the truth, here you don't tell the truth, here you say what's right, here you don't say what's right. It's almost a, again, a simpler proposition to simply say this is a Jewish value, truth, and, any hanky-panky or moving around that you try to do to try and, fudge that is a very, very dangerous endeavor. And so that's something to think about as well. So that's what I wanted to look at a little bit within some of the Jewish sources. I'll open up for comments or questions with some of the examples that we brought so far. Okay, here, let's see if we can share the screen. Again, this is just going to be in Hebrew. I'll try and translate. Interestingly, here, let me just see if I can get it here. Sorry. Okay, screen number 1. Okay, do you see the screen there? Okay, so again, this is the classic examples that are brought about situations where the truth was not told. And let's look at some of the examples of those individuals who did not directly express the truth. So, for example, let's start with the story in the end of Parshat Vayechi, which we talked about not long ago, right? So you have the story of that the brothers of Yosef, Yosef Lemor, Avicha Tziva Lemor Tolemor. Let me see if I can zoom in, see if you can see it a little better. Is this helpful to see? Ko Tomru Yosef Anas Sana Pesha Achicha V'Chatatam Kira'ag Balucha. They, brothers, come to Yosef and they say, so said your father, please forgive the sin of your brothers and their mistake that they've done terrible things to you. And now, please, basically forgive us for selling you down the river, so to speak, to selling you down to Egypt. Yosef and Yosef cried when they talked to him. And his brothers also cried. And they said, they said, we'll be slaves to you, right? Sorry. We'll be your slaves. And Yosef says, no, don't be worried. I'm not instead of God. You tried something bad, but God planned the goods. Etc. And so he says, don't worry, I'll take care of you. So the brothers essentially pulled their ace in the hole. What did they say? They said, Yosef, please forgive us. But they didn't just ask for forgiveness. They said, Avicha Tziva, your father commanded that we be forgiven for the terrible thing we did to you. Now, that never happened. At least that's the Talmud's assumption. That never happened. So let's talk about the truth-telling aspect here now. Right? So here you have a situation where they might not have, at least in their mind, they might not have gotten the same response out of Yosef, who was going to end up saying, I'll take care of you instead of I'll enslave you, right? Or kill you. What response did they get out of Yosef? They got Yosef to respond, don't worry, it's all good, it's okay. They could have made the very logical argument that the only way Yosef would have come to that point is if they came to him with the argument in the name of their father, who they knew held a special place in Yosef's heart. They wanted to bring out the big guns, so to speak. So they said, your father has commanded you to forgive us. Now, here's an example of at least part of the episode which seems to not be true. Now, if you look in the, if we just look from the perspective of the brothers, you could make the following argument, which is they know history, right? 2 generations ago, there was a father named Abraham who had multiple children. Some followed in his path, Isaac, and one was kicked out and treated as a pariah. That's Ishmael. Take even the next generation. You have Yaakov and Esav, the sons of Yitzchak. Yaakov was followed through the path, and you have Esav, who was kicked out, and not only that, who ended up being on the outs and swore that when dad dies, I'm going to kill my brother. You could argue that the cause that Yishmael had against Yitzchak, or the cause, let's focus in the second chapter, the Esav had against Yaakov, right? Their beef, so to speak, their feud is not to the level of what the brothers did to Yosef. So they, as students of history, could have made the argument, hey, Yosef is just waiting for dad to die, and then he's going to do what was exactly expected from all the way since Cain and Hevel, or Yosef and Yaakov, our father and uncle. They could have totally seen themselves in a position of, we're waiting for the other shoe to drop, right? Pikuach nefesh. And part of their argument would have been we need to remind Yosef of our father in a realistic way so that he indeed doesn't kill us. So presented that way, you could say that, well, maybe lying is permitted to save lives, right? Just like pikuach nefesh, the requirement to save lives, to stay alive, overrides all but 3 of the mitzvot in the Torah. Well, if they follow all these, if they follow that next, that logical trajectory, well, the mitzvah of saving our own lives will override the concept of our fealty to the objective truth. Now, if we talk about it in a different way, how many objective lies were told to customs officials when Jews were escaping, a persecution or pogroms or whatever? How many times did we get false papers, so to speak, to get where we needed to go to save lives? And no one would ever have the question of that was some objectively problematic thing to do. Perhaps that's where Yosef's brothers were coming from. And in that from that perspective, maybe that changes a little bit of the calculus of this notion of truth-telling. And as the Gemara in Masechet Yevamot says explicitly, and now, by the way, the Gemara in Yevamot takes this a step further. The Talmud doesn't say you're allowed to lie to save your life. It just says, Mutar lo adam lishanot b'devar hashalom. You may lie for the sake of peace. Now, by the way, I took the words the lishanot. Lishanot is not lishaker. Shaker means to lie. Lishanot means to shift or change. Again, slippery slope here, where you start justifying, oh, I'm not really lying, I'm just shifting or changing, I'm, the white lie versus black lie versus this lie, that kind of, no. You have to be really careful, again, about that objective high moral standard. But here, the Talmud is saying that the brothers are not to be faulted because there is this overarching value. You could say the overarching value of human life, or the way the Talmud phrases it, the overarching value of peace. That justifies this problematic activity of not telling the truth. The next example the Talmud gives is the story of Shmuel, right? Shmuel was tasked with anointing a new king. The only problem was that the old king was still alive and had no intention of not being king anymore. And so if Shmuel would go and do that, and Shaul, who was the old king, realized that he was going to inaugurate the new one, not going to go too well. And what does God say to do? So, if I go to this mission, God, Shmuel, if Shaul, the king, sees me, he'll immediately kill me for insurrection. What am I going to do? Says Hashem, Hashem, so God suggests a disguise, a ruse. Say, I'm on my way to take an animal, take a goat, take a sheep, whatever it is, and then go to the road, go on the road. And if you get stopped on the road by Shaul, and he says, hey, where are you heading? You say, oh, I have this animal. I'm going to bring a sacrifice to God. Not planning on anointing kings any day at all, anything like that. And so the stakes have just risen, because this isn't two brothers making a questionable moral judgment. This is God recommending that Shaul flat out lie. Sorry, I lost the microphone for a second. Let me just get it back in here. Let's see, there we go. So that's a really, really delicate, example where it goes as far as God's recommending that you do this. Now, again, you could say the same point, which is Shmuel was very clear that his life was on the line. If he didn't find some way to get past Shaul without him knowing what he was doing, he would be killed. So again, this is a pretty high stakes of, and maybe that concept of that objective truth and that flexibility with the objective truth is different when you are, in a position of life or death. The last example is the story of Vatitzchak Tzara b'kirba Lemor, story of Yaakov, of Abraham and Sarah. What happened? Abraham and Sarah were not young spring chickens, right? And they were told that they're going to have a child. Vatitzchak Tzara, and Sarah laughs. Lemor b'kirba acharei b'loti neb Adoni Zaken. Says, is this realistic to have a kid? Va'adoni Zaken, and my husband is very old. Vayomer Hashem el Avram lama zeh tzachak Sarah lomar afu mameli ba'ani zakanti. What happened? Sarah proclaims, there's no way we're going to be able to have a child. My husband's too old. When God retells that to Abraham, he says, Sarah complained that she doesn't think she'll have a baby because she's too old. Now this takes this to a new level. No one's life was on the line here. No one's life was in danger in the like in our previous two cases. However, the halacha ends up using a third example of God himself doing what you may say is a questionable practice. Right? So look at the Talmud in Yevamot. The Yevamot says, Deber Rishmal Tana, Gadol HaShalom, peace is so great, Sha'af HaKadosh Baruch Hu Shina Bo, that even God changed the description of the facts. Shenemar Meikar, because originally it says Va'adoni Zaken, that she blames the age of Abraham, but God retells it as saying that she was concerned about her own age. So here, you clearly recognize and understand the goal of changing the truth, but question we raise is the same one that the Talmud's struggling with, which is that, once you start playing games with the truth, it's not clear where those games end. Now, that's what the Talmud was dealing with, and the Talmud is essentially laying out the following theory, which is there are multiple values that we have and we hold as Jews. One of those values is emet, right? That's what the Gemara says. Amar b'chenina chotamo, the seal of God, shel kadosh baruch hu emet, is truth. Truth is a fundamental true value. That's why the Torah says, midvar sheker tirchak. Stay away from speaking falsehood. It's a fundamentally, morally repugnant thing to do, to speak falsehood. However, and this is where it gets really delicate, we have multiple other values, and sometimes those values clash. So, for example, saving a human life. Or what the Talmud is even going as far as to say is that the notion of shalom, peace. And when you have a genuine concern for peace, that may you now have to deal with the clash between the value of truth and the value of peace. And note, by the way, while the Torah says, the Talmud describes chotamo shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu shalom, hu emet, the seal of God, so to speak, God's signet is the notion of character trait of truth. A different line in that same Talmud tractate says, Asur la'adam she'yitain shalom l'chaber b'beit hamerchatz. If you're inappropriately attired because you're in the bathhouse, you're not allowed to say shalom to your friend. Because shalom is one of the names of God. And it's inappropriate to say God's name in a bathhouse. What is that saying? That's telling you that while the signet of God is truth, the name of God is peace. And so that's that concept that the Talmud is saying, that there is the notion of when you have a clash between peace and truth, you actually may follow in the line sometimes of truth and sometimes of peace. And that's what goes to those examples that we quoted, where it does not mean that the truth is not a Jewish value, right? There's a famous thing about lemad lashon chalom hasheker, that it's not appropriate even in lies that don't impact anyone, don't change anything, but it's just not a good way to train yourself to be saying things that aren't true. But the idea here comes of looking at the broad spectrum of the values in different ways. So listen to this famous passage from the Talmud in Ketubot, right? You're probably familiar with it. Keitzad merakdin lifnei hakala. What is the best way to serenade, to dance in front of a bride? Beit Shammai omrim kala kamotchi. Beit Hillel omrim kala na'ava chasuda. Beit Shammai say that you describe the bride accurately. Beit Hillel say you describe her in a way that is beautiful and we'll translate the word veiled, although that's probably not the accurate translation. Say Beit Shammai to Beit Hillel. Amrulin Beit Shammai to Beit Hillel. What happens if it's just not true? You're describing her in all these glowing honorifics. It's not true. Does the Torah not say stay away from falsehood? Beit Hillel responded, the Devrechem, according to you, if somebody goes and buys a bad purchase, it spends too much on something at Costco, whatever, and you then see that they bought this thing, and it was just a bad deal. They made a mistake, but they've now bought it. And they've sort of made their peace with it, or made their they've made this great purchase. And you objectively think it's a wrong and a bad purchase. What are you supposed to do? Yishabchenu be'inav or yiganenenu be'inav. Is the right thing to say, you idiot? Why'd you spend so much money on that furniture, that car, that piece of clothing? It's a terrible thing. You got a terrible deal. You got ripped off of it. Or do you say, I know that this is a non-returnable item. It is what it is. So do I praise it or do I denigrate it? You say, you know what? That's a great car. Nice car. Even if you don't like it or you don't think it's right or you don't think it's great. It says the same thing. A couple gets married. They're stuck to each other, through thick and thin, et cetera, of all the cliches added. They're in it together over the long haul. Is it appropriate to describe all the things that go against this marriage? This woman is this, and the guy has this flaw. Is that what you do at a wedding? You should praise them. And Beit Hillel seemed to be saying, you know what, Beit Shammai, there's something more important. Now, let's be clear. Beit Shammai are not saying, dance around the groom and bride and say, ugly couple, you're so ugly. That's not what Beit Shammai is suggesting. Beit Shammai is just saying you prioritize truth in the way in which you express yourself. And Beit Shammai's argument is that one of the fundamental aspects of what the Torah is teaching us, Midvar Sheker Tirchak, is that the concept of trust. And once you are willing to play fast and loose with the truth, the whole concept of trust falls apart. Beit Hillel are responding that they're dealing with a values clash here. That's why they conclude, you have, and I think they're exactly making Miriam's point. They're making Miriam's point, which is that, you know what? You should figure out what this is going to do with your relationship. And da'atomu revadim abriot means that your countenance, so to speak, should be, I guess the phrase would be, in harmony with the people around you. And if all the things that you're going to say, like, for example, somebody who just came into a relationship and you tell them how terrible of an idea that relationship is at their wedding, that's not mu'revatim abriot, and it's a mistaken focus on the values we're meant to express. So again, this is not something with a lot of answers. It's a very, again, slippery slope topic, and really just wanted to open it up to have the thoughts about how this plays out. Suzanne, go ahead.
Think about the bad buy from a friend. If he's a friend of you and he's someone who is a little bit less sophisticated and often does things very impulsively, you should say, oh, it's a wonderful car, but you know what? You should have studied it a little bit better. I think it's a good car, but I think you got it a little bit too much. You paid a little bit too much for the value, just to teach him something, to help. It's like, it's not that severe, but it's like teaching to fish instead of giving him an aluminum. Okay, understand?
I want to just take it a couple of minutes, but I want to just point to Suzanne, and actually some of the commentaries on the Gemara and Subot make this point. But the huge thing here is the context matters. Whereas, for example, when this fellow is dating, you could say, you know what, I don't know that this is the greatest match for you. Or when this person is considering or is potentially going to buy something in the future and learn and be educated how to make right purchases, great. The point they're making is it's at the wedding. Exactly. It's at the wedding, and you're making a toast, so to speak, or singing or serenading the couple. And while there may be a place to make exactly the point you said as a friend, to make the point you're saying, at least Beit Hillel is suggesting, and Beit Shammai, are sort of surrounding exactly the point you're making. But Beit Shammai would agree exactly. Beit Hillel are simply saying, in the context, it's not a productive or helpful thing to do for Murabin and Rabriot. I just want to, Suzanne, we'll finish with your point, and then I know that others are trying to share thoughts as well.
One of the summer sessions where the young rabbis came and taught us things, remember?
Mm-hmm.
there was a case where there was a shidduch going to be happening, and people, some very knowledgeable people, knew that it is a horrible match. And I think many very orthodox people would not do lashon hara and make it happen. So I mean, that was a whole discussion about whether or not. So I mean, things are happening because of this thing. There's some people who always want to be the good guy, and they're always looked at upon the very good guy, but they're not very good guys. They do everything just to make themselves look good.
They always have more nuances. Miriam, and then I'll hear from Maxine.
I think what we're learning a little more, hopefully, in society today, therapists help, people who are interested in your psyche, they help. Rabbis very often say very interesting things that helps one, and even in a relationship. Things are even said on Zoom that can be helpful. Therefore, today we learn, if possible, not to open your mouth that quickly. It's okay. It's okay. So many people say things to each other that they wish they could retract the moment it left their mouth. Therefore, how do you prevent it from leaving your mouth? You think, and I'm not preaching, I'm just saying what can help all of us, myself certainly included. Is it possible to think before your mouth goes? For example, the person who bought this stupid purchase or this overpriced purchase, whatever they did, it's obvious they're feeling guilty. They're sorry they did it. It's not up to you to tell them again that they did something stupid. They know it. They know it. So you can say in so many easier terms, look, you all make mistakes. You did something, perhaps you're learning that you won't do it again. But this is how I'd like to help you. I'd like to help you in your feelings so that you don't feel that badly because you learned a lesson, and let me know what I can do. You don't have to lie and say, no, the car is beautiful if it's not. You don't have to lie and say your dress is wonderful if it's not, or whatever. No one's asking you to do that. What they're asking you to do is be helpful to this person and to support them, and you lose nothing by supporting them because you also in your life will make those mistakes or have already. And so I don't think it's up to us anymore to be the big advice giver that we've all grown up. That's what mothers are supposed to do, and mothers don't necessarily have to do that. Sorry, but I believe it very strongly.
Okay. Yeah. Maxine, what did you want to share?
Oh, well, first of all, it's a lot of psychology. You have to know who you're talking to, and you don't want to hurt people's feelings. I learned something from my brother Izzy Shalom, who was an architect. And I had a friend or someone said, how does this look? A piece of furniture or something. And I thought they were honest in asking me because they know I'm the sister of an architect. But obviously it turned out they didn't. And I guess I insulted them. And I said to my brother, I did wrong. And he said, when they ask you what you think, they want you to tell them it looks good, period. So from that, I really learned a lot. You don't necessarily, you don't tell the truth, even if you want to. It's going to hurt their feelings.
Yeah, how exactly, play it. So there's a lot of discussion.
Could be the other thing that when they ask you, they really wanted your opinion. Now you're thinking for the other person. You don't know what the intent was.
That's what I thought.
What you feel obligated to do.
Well, You have to know who you're talking
No,
to.
you have to decide the best way to do it with that person, because every
Right,
case-
exactly.
I think Ben might want to say something. Is
Yeah.
his hand up?
I'm not sure. Ben, would you want to add something? I don't think so. So just to recap, we're going to have to end a little bit early today, but just to recap, what we tried to do was really muddy the waters on something that you may say is supposed to be very clear and very simple, which is that, we know the Torah says, "Bidvar sheker tirchak," you shall stay away from speaking falsehoods. And that's definitely a value in the Torah. But we've shared a couple of times and a couple of examples of ways that may not actually be 100% the case. And what we raised is the fact that we often have competing values, like the friendships we need to have, helping the person who's in the hospital, saving a life, that may be, or saving a marriage in the way that it's presented in terms of the way that God intervened with Avram and Sarah, where this is actually the correct thing to do, even if it isn't necessarily the detailed and objective truth. But we raised the issue that it's a dangerous kind of thing when you start making what could end up being excuses and justification for non-truthful behavior, when not telling the truth in a way that that erodes and undoes the trust that people have. So, in a certain regard, what I would say is that the truth somehow lies in between about truth, meaning that what our job is to look at the collective sense of what our values are, the collective sense of our values, and then try to make sure that the things that are meant to express our values are always in consonant with with what we believe. So, for example, if our values are to make sure we save human life, and that means using false papers to get out of a war zone,
Right.
then you're something different. But when you're trying to express, a sense of expression, and you take a look at what Matt has raised in the chat, the idea of you know, uh, trying to structure your conversations in a way that it doesn't require somebody to say something that's not true, or to say something that's wrong, because we hold truth as such a significant value. Yeah, Miriam.
I just want to say something quickly. Maxine, I think what you said is very profound and very pragmatic, because it's something we can work with on a daily basis. You said first, before you spoke, you said, know who you're talking to.
Yes.
In other words, if you're talking to a child and they did something that needs to be disciplined, something you don't like, or whatever, remember who you're talking to. You're talking to a very sensitive soul. Your words are very important. Do you want to crush them, or do you want them to respect you for what you said, so that they can feel safe with you again without your reprimanding them? So it all depends what we say to them and who they are. The furniture person is so personal. You can walk into a house and say, wow, I would never furnish my house this way. But then I'm not them. They're them and I'm me, you see. So that they don't have to furnish a house the way you want them to. So then we have to be very sensitive the way we answer them. They're adults, but nevertheless, it's important that we maintain a very good relationship. But the child, we have to be 100 times more sensitive than we think we're being, especially teachers. They can use a couple of words, demolish a kid who just answered a question, and the child will not raise their hand for the rest of the day. Keep on doing it, and the child will not raise their hand, period. So we have to be so careful.
Quick question.
Yes.
Next time, please, we want a lecture, if the others wanted to, about someone who is a diplomat and who dogel b'musar. because
Okay.
politics and truth have nothing in common.
Yeah.
For the good of the nation, it can be for the good of the nation, it can be every important reason.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. One of the speakers that we had, we could probably have again. My parents know me. Davos in our shul. His name is Daniel Taub, who is was the Israeli ambassador to the UK and has been pretty high in the diplomatic corps. And he spoke about these. And we're going to try and have him as a speaker, and maybe he can address those from personal experience in his diplomatic negotiating. So, all right. On that, want to wish everybody a great week, and we'll be able to back next week to learn together.
Are you